Someone decided to join me right at the last minute as I was pressing the record button. So, hey, welcome to week 3, everyone. This week we're going to talk about relaxation and felt safety. This is Frodo, and actually it's kind of perfect that he popped up here because petting him is relaxation for me. He's totally a big giant stress fidget for me. All right, so before we move on, let's look back at what we've done in our previous week. So in week 1, we talked about what a good assessment looks like, and we talked about safety and the therapeutic relationship. So after reading your submissions for week 1, I was able to observe that each of you have a really good understanding that assessment is an ongoing process and the importance our therapeutic relationship plays in that assessment process with our clients. And then last week, we discussed the beginning steps of TFCBT. So we're talking about prac stage right now. And that included psychoeducation and parenting. And I got kind of excited in that video. I get kind of excited in every video. But it's a really important step because it lays a firm foundation for our clients and their caregivers about a trauma and about the modality that they're going to be engaging in. And then this week, we're going to be talking about relaxation and affect expression. This is helpful, always, but it's really going to be helpful when we start the trauma work with our client, which is trauma narrative, but also our client is being gradually exposed to their trauma every session. So even from our initial session of assessment, we are exposing our we're exposing our client gradually to their trauma experiences, and we're assessing for their regulation abilities. So at the last semester, we talked about trauma in the body, how it impacts the biology of our brain. And this week, we're going to look at what it does to our overall body through the allostatic load. Well, what is the allostatic load? The allostatic load is the wear and tear stress takes on our body over time. So allostasis is maintaining stability, right, through change. So there are many things that can have influence on our allostasis. That's going to be genetics, early development, and behavior. So we learned a lot about early development last semester and how trauma affects developmental stages in adolescence, right? So I love how this all ties together. It just geeks me out every time. So we have a graph. Every time I do that every week. Okay, so we have a graphic here that discusses what the allostatic load is, right? So we have stressors like environmental stressors, work, home, our community, our family. We have major life events, starting new jobs, graduating from grad school, right? Moving, and then we have trauma and abuse. And when we look at that, the individual's brain is going to perceive it in a different way. Is it a threat? Is it significant? Does it make us feel helpless? And if you complete that circle, we know that we have behavioral responses where our amygdala is engaged, right? And because our amygdala is engaged, we choose a fight, flight, or response symptom. And we talked last semester a lot about our behavioral responses and how they affect us and how they are perceived by people outside of us. And then we have physiological responses. And it is in this period when our brain either adapts or we have allostasis, right? And it all sits on the allostatic load. And then we look at how those individuals process those differences. So I have another graphic that expresses what allostatic load is really beautifully. I'm going to bring it up here for us. All right, so you can see I have a Pinterest account. And I know that it says Wikipedia on here, and I don't normally recommend Wikipedia for research, but this graphic is spot on, and it helps me, so I wanted to share it with you. So we look at the bell curve that we have in this graphic, and I like it because it makes a whole lot of sense to me, right? I'm pretty sure everyone who's in this class had to take statistics in undergrad, and I freaking love statistics. I know, total geek, but it was awesome because it made a lot of sense to me. Like this bell curve makes a lot of sense to me. So if it makes a lot of sense to you, yoo-hoo, I hope it helps you understand that. If it doesn't, I'm really sorry that I've wasted your time. So when we look at this graphic here, we can see on one side, we have performance, and on the other side we have stress level. So when we're looking at a low stress level, we have an underload. Sometimes that can lead to low morale and fatigue, right? There's just not enough stimulating you. We talked about this last semester as far as understimulation, right? And then we hit this optimum peak amount of stress. It's just enough to give us some stimulation, but it's not enough to break us down, right? So after we hit that peak level and we start to get to high stress, we start to experience exhaustion. We go downhill, we start to experience breakdown, and when we start to experience overload, right? And it is when these things happen where we experience just really negative outcomes. So it's really important when we're working with our clients and as we get to assess our clients and to learn their trauma responses, that we can begin to offer them tools that will assist them in regulating what? Regulating those physiological responses, right? How do we do that? Relaxation, mindfulness techniques, and coping techniques. So just a quick review for these functions of behaviors, and we talked about this, right? We're going to trigger the amygdala, the prefrontal cortex is going to disengage, and then the relaxation, coping skills, mindfulness techniques, function of that is to re-engage the prefrontal cortex so that our amygdala gets to calm down. We allow our prefrontal cortex to start recognizing truthful and helpful thoughts, which then in turn affects the behavior, which also affects the feeling, right? So why is it really important in TFCBT to look at relaxation? Well, we have an additional resource in your module this week, and it's awesome. I love it. It talks about trauma and complex trauma. And we know that youth who've experienced complex trauma, and what is complex trauma? Let's review that real quick. Complex trauma is trauma that has been experienced by an individual, and that trauma has been placed upon them by someone who is supposed to take care of them, who is supposed to be a safe person, right? So complex trauma doesn't normally occur from a stranger, or it's not a one-time event, although it can be a one-time event, right? But often when we have complex trauma, we also have chronic trauma. And chronic means that it happened numerous times. So while TFCBT can be used for traumas that are not chronic, and it often is used for unchronic traumas, a lot of times when TFCBT is used, it is used with clients who have experienced chronic trauma. So repeated abuse, abuse by parents and caregivers. The foster youth I work with are almost always complex trauma. So we do also know that youth who experience complex trauma have a more difficult time regulating. And because they have a more difficult time regulating, it takes longer to build trust in therapeutic relationships. See, here we go, right? Like, we're taking what we've learned about the therapeutic relationship and we're tying it back to now relaxation techniques. Like, the therapeutic relationship is in itself a reminder of a complex trauma, right? And all this is in the handout that is included in your module 3. We are supposed to be a safe person that is there to care for them and provide them a safe environment. But oh my gosh, if this person has experienced complex trauma, then what does that mean about people who are supposed to be safe? They're not freaking safe, right? Oh God. Like, if we as clinicians can hold this truth, if we can understand this, and we can really truly value the importance of a therapeutic relationship through a trauma-informed lens, then it becomes not about us and what we think is safe and about our own pride and feeling of I'm an awesome therapist because I'm going to make my client feel safe, but instead humble ourselves and realize it doesn't matter about what we think about ourselves. What is our client's perception of us? And it is okay if we are not a safe person for them initially. We have to work to become a safe person for that client. It is not our right to be a safe person for them. It is a privilege to be a safe person for them. And we have to work for that privilege. Whew. Dude, who knew on a Sunday morning I was going to be up here on my little soap stand? But it's true. Gosh, I know I get so passionate about it, but it is just fundamental for all of our work with clients, but especially with this. And I'm going to apologize because my lecture is going to go over 15 minutes today. So we look at relaxation techniques. So we know that TFCBT, they like to break it down, right, into 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, and they like to have equal timing for each stage, which comes out to be like between 8 to 16 sessions. But when we're talking about a youth that we're working with that has chronic trauma, we need to be so understanding, and we need to be so grace-giving, and we need to extend this particular section graciously. So we are going to give this section about 50% of the time, which means we're going to extend out our sessions to up to 24 sessions. Why? Because every time client comes into our environment with us, starting at our initial session, and I know I've said this so many times, they are having trauma reminders. They most likely will be experiencing trauma symptoms. And that is just by being in the environment, having tiny gradual exposures. That's not even stepping into the trauma pool, y'all. That's just like arriving at the pool, walking through the gate and sitting down on your little lounge chair, right? That's not even jumping into the pool. And that client is not going to be able to process their traumas with us if they can't relax, right? Because the client is going to constantly be in what mode? Fight, flight, or freeze. Amygdala time. Bam, 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 bam. And we know when the amygdala is bam, 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 not only is our prefrontal cortex shot, right, which is our logical thinking, which is our learning and processing, but that client's hippocampus is also, dude, it's taken off. It's out. It doesn't want to remember anything that's going to happen that's unsafe. So our client is not going to retain anything. They're not going to process anything if they're not relaxed and their amygdala is able to be calmed, right? So there are just a plethora of relaxation techniques. And honestly, it is so fun and so amazing to have these sessions with our clients. So what would these sessions look like, right? So on the slide, we have 3 really, really nice relaxation techniques. And here's what you do with it, right? You do it. You practice it. You model it. Sometimes it's really weird to do a therapy session where you literally just practice breathing, right? Or you go through muscle relaxation, progressive muscle relaxation. Or you pull out a box of Orbeez and mess around with Orbeez. But see, as you're doing this, you start asking open-ended questions to your client about how their body felt when they first got there, right? We do our SUDS check-in. What does your body feel like now? as we're going through this relaxation techniques. We're teaching our clients, we're giving our clients the ability to be self-aware of that feeling within their body, right? So we talk about feeling identification. So sometimes when you're doing TFCBT, we are going to put feeling identification in front of relaxation techniques, or kind of do them simultaneously to a degree, right? Because if a client can't identify their feeling or where they feel that feeling in their body, they're not going to have that self-awareness to understand when that feeling is being relaxed within the body. If a client doesn't know that when they're stressed out, they grip their hands like this, or when they're getting angry, they start to tighten their hands. If they don't know that, then they're going to be unable to identify that if they do muscle relaxation techniques, that their hands feel more relaxed, that is their body releasing that emotion. There is some supplemental training techniques. We talked about EMDR, I think, at the beginning in the first week. And you have butterfly taps and you have safe place. Butterfly taps and safe place are useful when it comes to trauma relaxation skills. Just be really careful with EMDR that we're not overstepping our competency, okay? So safe place is something that we can use in a visualization, and I don't think it's overstepping our competency. But with anything we do, if you ever feel like there's an opportunity to overstep our competency, which is one of our ethics, please, please, please seek the advice of a supervisor or someone you trust and respect. We do it all the time, all the time. DBT is also really good for these things. And then we've got within our resources some PDFs. What I would recommend for you all is please take advantage of all of the additional resources we are providing for you. Download them into a file that's like labeled trauma-informed care, stick them on a flash drive, like every single supplemental thing we give you. Just utilize it. It's so helpful. When you leave this course, you'll have such an amazing resource. I love these next couple slides. They are so beautiful. These are great slides to share for psychoeducation. I'm not going to go through all of them, but they talk about when I feel unsafe, I feel, what is the feeling they're feeling? What is their behavior or their response? And then what do they need in order to help with overcoming that allostatic load, right? What do they need? This, again, is where we can pull in caregivers to help implement that need, but we also can share this with the client because it gives them an understanding and a knowledge of themselves and helps complete that idea of agency and autonomy. These, again, are more tips for regulation. I know that this is a little bit longer of a lecture, but I really wanted to make sure that you all had this really fine understanding of the beautiful relationship that all these things have together, so that when you're implementing regulation skills and when you feel like you keep doing regulation over and over and over again, and you must not be doing this right, you must be messing this up, that you indeed are succeeding. Like, you're doing it correctly. You are understanding at such a critical level the importance of what regulation does for the therapeutic relationship, which is all about the trauma-informed lens, right? So here we go, talking about feeling identification, right? Like I said, this is probably the most crucial step, right? Because we have to understand and identify our emotions before we can go on. But in order to be vulnerable enough to share our emotions with someone, for our youth to share our emotions, our youth need to trust us, to trust their therapist, right? To create that safe place. And we've talked about this every single lecture. So how do we do that? we give them permission to answer or not answer. We've talked about that. We allow for breaks. Dude, they control it, right? Plus, if we see that they are popping that lid and we don't give them a break, we are just going to frustrate them. Allow for breaks. What can we do during breaks? We can practice relaxation skills, right? We can offer snacks, right? Why? If somebody is hungry, they're not going to be able to engage, right? And we are going to, again, try to present them with a safe place, like within the environment, within the physical environment. Here are some more techniques that can help with feeling identification. I do a lot of kinesthetic work, especially with my youth who've experienced trauma. A lot of times they have difficult time sitting still or barriers to just being still. So do a ton of kinesthetic work. Well, I've done all of these things as far as what we can do to help with feeling identification. And honestly, there are so many amazing hands-on interactive tools out there for feeling identification that it's endless. You have to find the one that works with your youth, right? So again, if you try something and it's a total fail, don't get discouraged. Just try something else. We also learn from assessment what our youth likes. So if we can find an activity that will engage our youth because of their interest, and then layer on top of that a feeling identification aspect, bam, point, right? Like you totally got this. So again, some more aspects to affect modulation, and we totally talked about this already, that they have to understand their triggers. Parents have to understand their own emotions. And then what can we help the child do when they are experiencing triggers, right? Thought, stop, and imagery works great with younger kids because we do a lot of physical kinesthetic movements. When we have a negative thought, when we recognize a trigger, stop, put our hand up. We make it a big movement, right? Stop. With imagery, same thing. We can engage our children and this device. Please remember that for some children, the idea of closing their eyes while in a room with someone who is supposed to be safe may not feel safe. And if it is something that does not feel safe to them, do not force it. Do not force imagery. Oftentimes, we can work up to a level when imagery is something that is totally beneficial for this youth, but try to remember to use that trauma-informed lens and do not force a child to close their eyes to use imagery if it does not work. We can use drawing as imagery also. Positive self-talk, enhancing safety, enhancing problem solving and social skills, making a coping plan. We utilize this a lot with psychoeducation. If we know that a client is going to experience a trigger, there's an unavoidable trigger, what is the plan for when they experience that trigger? Give that client, again, that sense of agency and ownership over developing a plan for using their coping skills. Okay, I want to thank you for allowing me to have this lecture be a little bit normal than a little bit longer than our normal lecture. I think it's a really important aspect of TFCBT and what we do and why we do it. Some quick reminders. Let me find my reminder sheet real fast. Okay. Participation activities for Module 3 are due on Sunday the 14th. It's a group exercise, a group discussion board. You all should already be parceled out into your groups. So when you hit your discussion button, your participation little linky thingy, it'll put you into your groups automatically. Case study is open as of today. That is not due until week 4 module, but I opened it, so please get started working on it. Reach out with any questions that you have at that time. And please remember, if anything starts to trigger you in this class, do not hesitate to reach out to me or reach out to a greater support system. This stuff is hard, and you all have a ton on your plates. It is like go time, right? So please remember to take care of yourselves, to exercise self-care. And as an example, I'm exercising self-care today. I have on my hoodie, right? I have my cup of coffee, and I am exercising self-care by being comfortable in comfortable clothing while I talk to you all. As always, thank you for allowing me to be part of your journey. Thank you for allowing me to share my passion with you for trauma-informed care, and just have the week that you all need.